Good evening and welcome to the webinar. My name is Roisin White. I'm a Communications Executive here at Fingal County Council, and I'll be your host for this evening's session as we talk about the public consultation on the Sutton to Malahide Pedestrian and Cycle Scheme. Tonight we'll be presenting the preferred route to you and look forward to taking your questions about that route in just a few minutes. Our webinar will be recorded and that recording will be made available online in the coming days. The recording of our last session, which took place on Thursday of last week, which I believe was the 7th of April, is also available online at the moment at fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide. This public consultation began on March 24th and will conclude on May the 9th. This long period is to allow enough time for as many people who are interested to review the details of the scheme and to share their views on it. You can share your views by making a submission, and submissions can be made by individuals or by groups such as residents associations or commercial associations who may prefer to bring their comments together as one group. And we welcome your views on every aspect of the proposal. You can share your views, as I said, at www.consult.fingal.ie. Here you'll also find a questionnaire, which some people may prefer to use rather than having the unstructured format of writing in their own views. The questionnaire can guide you through the things we'd like to know about your reactions to the scheme. And if you'd like to make a submission by post rather than doing so online, all of the details on how you can make a postal submission are also available at that address. We'll begin in a moment with a short presentation from the project team, which is led by Paul Carroll, Senior Engineer here at Fingal County Council, Senior Executive Engineer Cian O'Callagher, and Chris Fay of Atkins, and then we'll move on to a question and answer session. This online event is your opportunity to ask questions of the team, including their consultants who have helpfully joined us online tonight and are ready to answer your queries. This is the second of two webinars, and as I mentioned, our first took place last week and the recording is already available online. If you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box. You'll find the Q&A button in the top right-hand corner of your screen. We're expecting a high volume of questions from those who join us on the session this evening. And as many people tend to ask similar questions on a given topic, we might need to paraphrase or merge together some of those questions in order to cover as many as possible. If you don't hear your exact wording read aloud, please don't be alarmed. A transcript of all questions as written will be provided to the project team for them to review in the course of their work on this project. And every one of your comments will be read by the team. In the unlikely event that we encounter any technical issues, please bear with us while we endeavour to resolve them as quickly as possible. If the webinar needs to be restarted, please check your email. The email you use to register for this session will be where we'll send you a new joining link if that happens. Thank you very much again for joining us. And as I said, please do start to pop your questions into the Q&A box and we will get to them as soon as possible. Let's get started now with a short video which showcases the route.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. Paul Carroll is my name. I'm Senior Engineer in Transportation in Fingal County Council. We're delighted to be here this evening to talk about this project. It's one that we're very excited about here, and we think this project is going to do a lot for the areas along the route. We think it's going to be part of a wider network, obviously, but it's going to really open up the villages along the way to make those shorter 1 and 2 kilometre trips within each of the villages much more accessible for people across all ages and all abilities, and that's what we hope that it will achieve. It'll also open up the wider area and link into the really successful greenway there at Baldoyle already. So nobody who lives along there needs reminding of the fantastic scenery along there and just the really nice the nice place that it is to be, and the beaches and the accessibility to all the nice amenities and village centres along there. So we've been working on this for a while. We're probably not 100% of the way there in terms of the design. We're maybe 80 to 90% of the way there. So we do want to hear your feedback. We know that there's some areas which already that there's some feedback coming in on. We're really happy to hear what people want to get from this scheme. We're particularly interested to hear the feedback from the local community on particular enhancements or particular features that they want to maybe incorporate into the scheme, such as public or urban realm enhancements, such as, you know, new signage, new areas that they might want to see landscaped, or, you know, public lighting, seating, anything like that that we can add onto this scheme to kind of transform it from merely a cycle or a walking route into something that benefits everyone along the route. A mark of a successful scheme such as this is that it's accessible for everyone from age 8 to 80, and that's what we're going to try to achieve in this. So we need your input for that. So I'd encourage you all to make a submission through the Fingal Consults portal, and I'll now hand you over to Cian O'Callagher, who's the project manager for this scheme, who'll go into some more detail. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Cian O'Callagher. I'm a Senior Executive Engineer with Fingal County Council, and I'm going to provide you with an overview of the project, the public consultation, and the next steps for the project going forward following the consultation. Sutton, the Malahide scheme will provide a coastal walking and cycling route linking Sutton, Baldoyle, Portmarnock and Malahide. Ultimately, it'll form part of a wider route connecting into the Sutton to Sandy Coast scheme to the south, and the Broadmeadow Way and Fingal Coastal Way schemes to the north across Malahide Pedestrian and on to the Meath border at Balbriggan. It's an urban scheme with mostly segregated pedestrian and cycle facilities extending to approximately 8 kilometres. The scheme in total will be 10 kilometres if you include the completed Baldoyle section. It'll encourage tourism, recreation and business, offering an attractive sustainable transport choice for residents, businesses, school children and commuters. It's a non-statutory public consultation, a consultation that's not set out in any legislation but would be regarded as best practice to consult at this stage, and it follows a feasibility and route options consultation in 2017. The consultation is for a 6-week period from the 24th of March to the 9th of May. We're consulting on the preferred route preliminary design. The consultation is to help us complete and develop this preliminary design in advance of a submission to An Bord Pleanála in 2023.
We've published a large amount of consultation material as part of this consultation, including promotional videos and images. And while these are largely a good representation of what the scheme will look like when it's finished, there are a few areas we'd still like to develop further. This would include Baldoyle Prom, which you can see on the top right. The intention along this prom is to move the inner wall out towards the roadside, widening the prom. And this gives us between 5 and 7 meters along that stretch. The planting we've shown there is largely conceptual, and we're looking for people to come forward with ideas for that prom. Given that the width is between 5 and 7, there's plenty of scope for segregation along it. And that can be done with planters and seating also where there is width available. We've produced a number of media advertisements, including print media and social media, We've delivered over 17,500 leaflets to residents and businesses in the area. We have a consultation portal which receives submissions. There's also an online questionnaire. All the drawings and reports are on this consultation portal, and the videos and images are also available online. We're having 2 webinars with Q&As, one last Thursday and one tonight. We had a drop-in information evening in Portmarnock Hotel a couple of weeks ago, which was very successful.
The next steps for the project team during and following this public consultation are to identify any issues of local concern raised, consult with key project stakeholders. That'll be an ongoing process beyond this consultation period. Review comments, queries and suggestions from the consultation. Publish a public consultation report. This report will contain all the data from the public consultation and report on all the key issues raised. This will help inform the development of the preliminary design going forward and help us to complete an application for planning to onboard Planola in 2023. During this planning application, there will be a further consultation period, and that will be a statutory consultation process. A high-level look at the project timeline, which is available on our console portal, highlights some key dates, including a planning application to onboard Planola in Q1 2023. We would hope to have a decision from the board by the start of 2024, and it would take possibly a year for detailed design and another 2 years for construction. So we envisage commencing construction in 2025 with a completion date in 2027. Feedback on the scheme proposal is important to us to help make the Sutton to Malahide pedestrian and cycle scheme a flagship amenity. Information can be viewed at fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide and submissions made through the consult.fingal.ie portal. Hard copies are available at Baldoyle Library, Malahide Library and Fingal County Council offices at Swords and Blanchardstown. The consultation concludes on the 9th of May, and again we'd welcome submissions to help us develop the scheme further. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Cian for that piece of presentation. We'll move to a presentation from Chris Fay of Atkins in just a moment. Just a reminder for those of you who maybe joined the session a little later and aren't aware, we're very open to welcoming your questions, and there is a question and answer button in the top right hand corner of your screen at the moment. If you'd like to put a question to the team, please type it into that box, and we'll be getting to the questions as soon as we've finished our presentation segment.
Thanks, Roisin, and good evening to all. My name is Chris Fay. I'm a senior engineer with Atkins Ireland. Following on from Cian's presentation, I will give you a brief overview now of some of the more technical aspects of the proposed layout of the Sutton to Malahide pedestrian and cycle scheme. The contents of my presentation include an overview of the scheme and then a focused look at some sample locations and a discussion of the designs developed therein. The scheme as shown in the map to the left routes from Malahide in the north to Sutton Cross in the south, via the towns of Portmarnock and Baldoyle. Some key features include an overall length in the order of 8.2 kilometres, a scheme purpose to develop a high quality urban greenway that caters for leisure and commuter trips for both pedestrians and cyclists. Dedicated cycling and pedestrian facilities segregated from vehicular traffic are proposed. This will be obtained through the provision of a vertical curb and in most cases the provision of a half-metre wide buffer strip. Pedestrians and cyclists will also be generally separated by means of a low curb. In some limited cases, this will not be possible due to environmental and technical challenges. In such cases, alternative layouts are proposed, including shared path, boardwalk and shared street arrangements. Moving on, the following slides discuss the design detail of some sample locations. These locations include Strand Street, Strand Court in Malahide, Velvet Strand in Portmarnock Village itself, and Baldoyle Promenade south of the village of Baldoyle. In terms of Strand Street and Strand Court, these are designed to operate as a shared street, meaning that cyclists are encouraged to cycle in lane with traffic. To ensure that the streets operate in this intended way, the street design incorporates a number of elements that encourage cyclists to confidently use the scheme in this manner. Measures include a 1 metre wide high quality paving trim material adjacent to the curb line, which will do two things. One being visually narrowing the carriageway, which will reduce vehicle speeds, and in combination with a smooth 3.5 metre wide surface along the centre of the street, will encourage cyclists to take that dominant position along the centre of the lane. High quality surfacing is also proposed to the footpaths, and this will extend to the raised table areas at crossings and junctions to give a greater sense of pedestrian priority. This image here shows a bird's eye view plan of the proposal at Strand Court and Strand Street. The perspective sketch here gives a visual representation of what the scheme will look like. In terms of Velvet Strand, the proposals include the provision of a segregated two-way cycle track along the pedestrian promenade with high quality surfacing applied to both. At Wendell Avenue, the junction is being revised to be more compact with smaller turning radii and corners, a raised junction table and upgraded crossing facilities. The public realm proposals also include the creation of a new terrace seating area at the location of the existing steps south of the ice cream kiosk. This will provide easy access towards the beachfront and offer opportunities for seating. Additional seating will also be provided at other locations along with street planters and low-level planting where space allows. The scheme as proposed will enhance amenity, offer opportunities to enjoy the surroundings and scenery, whilst also accommodating a high-quality pedestrian and cycle facility. The image to the left presents the design opposite Wendell Avenue with the raised table, the crossing and the transition from the cycle track to the shared area opposite the side road junction. The image to the right presents the layout of the terrace step area and the landscape proposals contained therein. This image pulled from the animation video presents the approach to the Martello Tower with the two-way cycle track provided on the coastal side. This image here presents the perspective sketch adjacent to the terraced area and shows how the two-way cycle track and promenade and bus stop and car parking all integrate together. Moving on to Portmarnock Village, the facilities here include the provision of a one-way cycle track on both sides of the road. This form of cycle provision has been chosen as it has the greatest ability to integrate with the busy town centre environment such as that of Portmarnock. This provision will require alterations to the existing streetscape, including the removal of car parking, local relocation of crossings and bus stops, and indeed narrow land take strips will be required along some property boundaries and gardens. The public realm proposals do seek to enhance the village centre environment, and this is in line with the aims of the 2010 Portmarnock Urban Centre Strategy. As such, high quality surfacing is proposed to footpaths, and this is to extend to the raised table areas at crossings and junctions to give a greater sense of pedestrian priority. There is also potential for this to extend to other adjacent areas. However, consideration of these will be explored at the next design stage. The images here, the one on the left presents the junction at Carrickhill Road and how the one-way cycle track on both sides integrates with that junction. On the right-hand side, the scheme as it passes St. Anne's Church is depicted. On the left on this slide, the area at Golf Links Lane is shown. with potential there for a public realm space at the junction corner. This area on the right hand side then is in advance of St. Lawrence O'Toole Avenue and is a location where property boundaries will be affected and a narrow strip of land take will be required. The image here shows the scheme perspective within the town centre and how it will integrate with the town centre. This image here shows the area in advance of St. Lawrence O'Toole Avenue where a land take is required and how the scheme will integrate with the area at this location. Finally, at Baldoyle Promenade, this section of the route is proposed to comprise of a wide shared cycle and footpath arrangement. A minimum 3.5 metre wide through route for pedestrians and cyclists will be maintained, and seating and planting will be incorporated along the promenade at regular intervals. These features will be positioned in a staggered arrangement to create a sense of interest and to offer opportunities for stopping and appreciating the surroundings. The public realm proposals include the area outside Baldoyle Library, which will help improve connectivity between this area and the promenade. The proposed surfacing will be a combination of buff coloured asphalt and high quality paving. This type of pattern will further enhance the distinctiveness and attractiveness of the route along the promenade. It should be noted that there is scope for the provision of a segregated cycle facility along the promenade at this location, and consideration of this will be explored at the subsequent design finalisation stage. The images here show the promenade opposite the Baldoyle Library and opposite the Burrfield Lane area. This image again is taken from the video animation and just gives the viewer a sense of the arrangement proposed along the promenade. And that's my presentation for now. I'll pass back over to Roisin and look forward to any questions which I'm asked to answer. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Chris, for that very helpful presentation. And we'll move in just a moment to Q&A. Before we do, again, for anyone who may not be aware or came into the session a little bit later, please do put your questions into the question and answer box. You'll find it in the top right-hand corner of your screen. The team are all here this evening and very much looking forward to answering your questions. And we have a number of those questions in already. So with that, I'm going to move to question 1, which has come in, and I'm going to put this question to Cian, which is: considering both the north and south approaches to Portmarnock Village are proposed two-way cycle paths on the west side of the road, why did you decide to introduce a one-way cycle path as the best option through the village? This proposal requires a cyclist travelling south through Portmarnock Village to cross the road twice within a 750 metre distance. Cian, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, the pedestrian and cycle scheme is largely segregated and two-way for the what will be 10 kilometres when fully complete. However, when you enter Portmarnock, you enter a different dynamic and a different approach has to be taken. Consideration has to be given to how the businesses function in Portmarnock and how people, and particularly pedestrians, interact in the village. In a village setting, pedestrians have priority and take preference over the other modes of traffic in the village. When you get to Portmarnock, the idea would be that Portmarnock will be a calmed area. There'll be a number of crossing points to allow that typical village business activity to be undertaken without barriers. If you were to provide a segregated two-way cycle lane on one side with a buffer zone, that may hinder the working dynamic of the village, and it may act as a barrier between getting from one side of the road to the other, and inhibit that busy village feel that you want in a village, and that attracts people into a village. So yeah, a different approach had to be taken because of the activity in the village and the number of interactions that you would encounter in a village setting.
Thanks, Cian. That's a really comprehensive answer. So sticking with the Portmarnock area now, as we all know, Portmarnock is home to some of the most lovely beaches in North Fingal. And we've been asked, I'm going to put this question to Chris, where will cars park when they come to Portmarnock Beach?
Thanks, Roisin. Yeah, for Portmarnock Beach, the parking is largely unchanged and will be provided at the same locations, such as along Velvet Strand, and also there's the existing public car park at that area as well, which has ample parking. There's also some parking locations further north, Low Rock and High Rock. And I suppose the real change as part of the scheme really for parking in that area is that it's simply being formalised to align with the standards and DMARS and that, so that the parking spaces and their dimensions are in line with the current best practice.
Thanks, Chris, for that answer. I hope that satisfies the person who asked that question. So the next question is coming around a more technical aspect of the work we're doing here. So Cian, I'll put this question to you. The summary report gives reference to additional route optioneering reports at various locations along the route, such as at Strand Road and Baldoyle. When will these be available to view?
Yeah, the main summary report that we've published references a number of technical notes and options assessments and summarises those. We do intend publishing those hopefully by the end of this week. We'll have them up on the website. We have had some queries on them, so we will be publishing them. There's one in particular, Borough Court, that we're interested in feedback on as well. So yeah, they should be available in the coming days on the website.
Thanks, Cian. Just to reiterate, for those who maybe aren't familiar with it, you can find all of the technical information, drawings and design details around this consultation on consult.fingal.ie, and you should also be able to find the same information at fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide. And as Cian said, those reports will be added in the coming days. Cian, I'll stick with you for the next question, which is the Baldoyle segment of the cycle route that's a shared cycle and walking area a very large risk? This person says they cycle regularly on this route at 20-30 kilometres on the road, and that a shared cycle and walkway route is possibly a no-go for a lot of cyclists. They say either cyclists will not use the new route or will stick with the road, or walkers may be at risk of collision with bikes. Is there any comment you'd like to make around that shared space?
The drawings and images we've provided are largely conceptual, and we have had some discussion on this at the last webinar and at our drop-in evening, and there is scope to segregate cyclists from pedestrians along that prom, and we're looking for people's input on what they think the prom should look like when we finish. The intention is to move the outer wall closer to the road and make the prom wider, so there is scope to segregate even with planting or seating or things like that. So we're open to suggestions, and I'd invite you to make submissions on that, and we can attempt to address those concerns through our analysis of the submission. So any concerns of that nature, of a technical nature, will be looked at following the consultation, and we'll be publishing a report on those submissions then also.
Thanks, Cian. So just to clarify for people who may be a little bit less familiar with the public consultation process, at this stage, this is the defined route, but the details of the actual scheme itself and what it will look like are somewhat still open for negotiation. Is that correct?
The scheme is largely complete, but there are elements of it that we feel we need the public's input to complete. So the route is selected. It's the detail, like the previous question, that we want feedback on to help us meet the needs of the local resident and the user going forward, and help us develop the scheme, the last 10-15% of the scheme between now and a planning application. So again, we welcome all submissions that come in, on particularly on those who use it and foresee themselves using it into the future. So.
Thanks, Cian. I think people will find that really helpful in terms of what the content of their submissions might be. So moving on to the Baldoyle area now, and I'm going to put this question to Chris. In Baldoyle, what's the plan for the stretch of track from the community centre in Baldoyle to the existing Baldoyle to Portmarnock Greenway?
Yeah, the plan is to route a shared path in behind the community centre and the church. I suppose just to give a bit of context in advance of that, we have one of those transition points where we not only cross the existing road to get to that area, but we also go from a two-way cycle track to this shared path that I mentioned. And I suppose as we route along the back there, and then we, as the question suggests, we tie in with the existing route on the Baldoyle Promenade. So the route will be shared. It'll be in the order of 4 meters width, utilising the available space provided by the existing unopened section of the promenade that exists there. There are some level differences that will need to be addressed when we get into the detail. And indeed, the structure of the promenade there will need further investigation to ensure it's, you know, of sound construction and that. I suppose just it's kind of related to the question that Keane just answered there in terms of if it is the case that we review the segregation along the Baldoyle Promenade, I would envisage that consideration along to the rear of there will also be involved at that time. So that's broadly what's going to happen there. I would also note that obviously we get close to the estuary there and the habitats and the SACs, the Special Area Conservation. So, you know, arising out of the EIA assessment, that the environmental impact assessment that's been undertaken, there'll also be anything that's recommended for mitigation there will also be taken on board.
Thanks, Chris, for that answer. So the questions are continuing to come in thick and fast. Thank you very much to those of you who have joined the webinar and are so engaged. As I said, your questions are very welcome, so keep putting them into the Q&A box and we'll endeavour to get through as many of them as we can this evening. The next question I'm going to put to Paul Carroll, which is, has a greenway route been considered to avoid the Portmarnock Village Centre, for example, by using the open space to the east and west edge of the Portmarnock Hotel links?
Yeah, there was a previous exercise undertaken to look at kind of route corridors, so it would have been the kind of previous iteration, and it would have been at a higher level, so looking at lines on the map and at a much higher scale to see where people wanted to go. And I suppose the outcome of that and what we've found, I suppose, both in Fingal, in Ireland generally and internationally, is that people on these types of routes, they want to go to where the centre of the activity is, to the village centres, to the town centres. They want to link into the train stations, and especially, you know, if you're talking about kind of convenience, comfort, security and safety on these type of routes, you want them to go where the people are, where the activity is, where the passive surveillance is. So on a number of headings, those kind of more out of the way kind of circuitous routes don't really stack up. Keane alluded to it earlier in terms of the level of activity within, say, Portmarnock Village, for example. That's kind of what we want to tap into, and that's what we want to encourage and enhance and, you know, facilitate within all the village centres along the route here. And that's why we're trying to link up each individual centre along this scheme. And again, that ties into then a wider network. To the north, it'll be going eventually across the Broadmeadow Estuary and onto Donabate and further north, and then south it will link into the S2S, which will bring you down through Sutton and Bayside and back into towards Dublin City, also tying into a lot of the newer schemes that our active travel team are working on around the Baldoyle and Howth areas. So it's building up that network, but yeah, essentially what we find is that people do want to go into the village centres, and they want to really make use of the village services and the shops, cafes, restaurants, and also the schools and sports clubs and train stations. So that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Thanks very much, Paul. A question is coming here now, again around the Baldoyle Promenade area. So the video shows a wall on the promenade in Baldoyle separating the promenade from the road. Is this a current wall being retained, or is this a new wall? Pardon me, and I'll put that to Chris.
Thanks again, Roisin. Yeah, the wall at the Baldoyle Prom, I suppose we would endeavour to reuse the existing wall materials, and this would obviously be subject to further investigation, both from a structural and a heritage point of view. If for whatever reason we found that we couldn't reuse the existing wall, we would then rebuild with a new wall, basically using similar material to which is currently there.
Thanks, Chris, for that answer. A question now about linkages. Just a question: is there a planned linkage to Clongriffin with this route? Dublin City Council have made a cycle route to the rail line to the rail line up to the tunnel at Baldoyle side of the rail track, and this person was told that there is a plan to link these routes together with this plan. Paul, can I put that question to you, please?
Yeah, no, that's that's exactly the case. As I was saying earlier, this scheme is one part of the wider network, and another key part of it will be that connection through the new racecourse park that is currently in with On Board Pleanála. We applied for it a few months ago to On Board Pleanála for planning permission to build a new park in that area, and as part of that there'll be cycle and walking connections running towards Clongriffin.
Thanks, Paul, for that clarification. A question now around the Sutton area. What is the plan for the track from Sutton Dart Station to Sutton Cross? Chris, can I ask you to come in on that one?
Yeah, I suppose there's probably about 4 components to that area. The first is just at Sutton Station and the rail line. So we're crossing the rail line with a 2-way cycle track and an adjacent footpath. We're in discussions and liaison there with Irish Rail on that, and we've come up with a design where we cross it at 90 degrees so that bicycle tires and that won't get caught in the rail tracks, which could lead to accidents occurring. Then as we progress south, we're still on our 2-way cycle track. We pass the station access points, and then we traverse onto the south western side of the road, where there's a large green verge area, and I suppose that's the second component of that, and that heads down south towards Sutton Cross. So a 2-way cycle track with adjacent footpath progression along that wide verge area. And then the other 2 components, I suppose, is at the Sutton Cross, where at the moment that's really where our scheme terminates, and we're just really tying in with the existing pedestrian and any cycle facilities that are there. We haven't proposed anything for the junction, and if there are future proposals, which I'm sure there will be, that'll be subject to a separate study. But I suppose our scheme doesn't end there in reality, because we're looking at providing a route through Suttonian's rugby club, which will then make our way out onto the Dublin Road, and tie in with the active travel scheme that's proposed or at site there now on the Dublin Road, and that in turn will then lead us onto the Sutton to Sandy Cove scheme, which will join in towards Clontarf.
Thanks very much, Chris. Going back to Baldoyle now, the person that has put this question in has asked for clarification. With the part from Baldoyle Church to Red Arches roundabout on the R106, what's happening with that very old seawall on the seaside of the coast road? And can we also offer clarification around the preserved brick red arch on the other side of the road? Cian, can I ask you to come in on that one, please?
Yeah, the proposal at present uses the green space adjacent to the community centre and crosses the road, where it'll be 2-way to meet the existing part of the scheme. The red arches along that old wall are protected structures, and a previous planning permission was conditioned to take those down and reincorporate them into their development. They will be protected. If we go before any development there, we'll have to undertake the measures to protect those, whether that's taking them down and numbering them, incorporating them into our scheme. I'm not sure it's feasible, but it's something we have spoken about. So they are protected, and they will have to be reused either as part of our development or the wider development of the racecourse site at that location.
Thanks, Cian, for that very helpful clarification. So as we know, this scheme is a big change for the area, and there's a question here that says, is there any intention to do a trial or pilot of sections of the scheme? Paul, could you come in there, please?
I suppose at the moment we're at the preferred route stage, and we're trying to essentially finalise the remaining kind of outstanding areas of the design where we want to get your feedback to feed into that. At the moment, we would see that design and environmental assessment phase continuing for the remainder of this year, essentially, with a view to submitting a planning application to On Board Pleanála in early 2023. So I suppose in that context, we wouldn't see a trial being something that we would be looking for at this stage. We've had some good feedback so far. We've got a bit more work to do. If something comes up that we might that throws us off course, a trial is something that could potentially come onto the table. But at the moment, we're moving forward in a traditional manner, I suppose, in terms of finalising our design, listening to your input, and submitting a planning application, which will involve probably an appropriate assessment, which is a planning document to look at potential impacts on the special area conservation, and an environmental impact assessment, which is an assessment on the impacts on the wider environment along the route of the scheme to on board Planola next year. And I suppose important to note then there'll be another phase of consultation as part of that. So it's a planning application, it's a statutory process, and at that stage people will also be able to make submissions to the board, and that'll be considered by the board at that stage. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's a really helpful run through of the process to come. And so we're back to the question and topic of linkages now, which is, will you provide a pedestrian link between Malahide Beach Car Park and the proposed pedestrian and cycleway? Chris, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, that's a very good observation, and it's something that came up at the information evening. So yeah, there's a clear desire line there. It's an easy win, so there'll definitely be a link provided between the scheme and the car park, and that's the kind of feedback that really helps get the extra the extra percentages in terms of linkage and permeability for the scheme, and getting making access to the scheme easy for people. So that's a good one.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that response. Another question here now, which I'm going to put to Cian, which is, will water points be implemented during the scheme along the way, such as water stations have been placed in Howth and Malahide parks?
Again, we haven't got down to that level of detail on the project, and that'll follow this consultation. But any suggestions on water points, planting, artwork, any areas of local interest that you feel could be enhanced along the scheme? We're looking for those submissions. And again, water points will be considered, but it's not at this stage yet, but it will be going forward.
Thanks, Cian. So a question here around how will the scheme work through Malahide with the signal control under the bridge? There'll only be a single narrow carriageway in that area, and surely a whole village plan might be required in this instance, says this person. Paul, would you like to comment on that?
So under the bridge at the moment, I suppose there's a kind of an informal give way system, a kind of a courtesy system where if you see someone coming in a car against you, you usually give way, and that's how it operates at the moment. With this plan and with the Broadmeadow plan, I suppose going over the Malahide estuary, we probably envisage a huge increase in people cycling, walking, and much more activity in that area. So to manage that safely, what we're proposing is a more formalised arrangement involving traffic lights to basically formalise that stop-go arrangement. So it'll still be only wide enough for one car to get through, but we do need to put in extra controls there to make sure that everyone is safe there. Yeah, the question is asking for a wider kind of village assessment. I suppose that might be something that happens in time. I know there are plans within Fingal County Council to look at the New Street in time as well. So that might come out, but as it stands, as part of this scheme, we have a solution there that I think we're happy with.
Thanks, Paul. Another question here around connectivity. So will the proposed greenway be connected to new housing developments, housing developments along Station Road in Portmarnock, and ultimately to the newly developed cycle lanes at the Drimna Road? Cian, you might like to respond here.
The proposed pedestrian cycle scheme passes directly through some of the development at Station Road. So it's one of the things we've considered. There's be considerable population growth in the area, and this will link them directly to Portmarnock and Baldoyle villages. In terms of the wider Drimna area, that'll come along as development happens and is largely dependent on the development of those lands in there. And obviously provision of a railway crossing and those kind of things. But they're all being considered in terms of roads planning going forward, and the ultimate aim would be to have a full cycling network in the area. And Fingal providing an alternative, a sustainable alternative that's easy for everyone to use. So that's the objective of all these schemes. This is one part of a major part of a bigger jigsaw, but ultimately the aim is to connect all these residential areas to the villages.
Thanks very much, Cian. We've time for one final question here, which has come in, and it's that will bike parking be provided? Paul, I'd like to go to you on this one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so again, I think bike parking is kind of maybe the next level of detail design that we haven't quite gotten to yet, but it is something that we're trying to capture at this stage. It's a really important feature that people are able to use the facility and to park bikes where they're safe and secure, and where they're not kind of causing any clutter or any hindrance to other people, say pushing buggies or walking along the footpath. So it's something that we're going to further develop in the coming months as the design develops, and we're happy to take people's views on board on that. There was a question earlier around car parking at Portmarnock Beach, and it's something that's come up as well. And in terms of Malahide Beach and at High Rock, there's a lot of demand for parking as well. I suppose what we would see this scheme doing is maybe freeing up capacity for people who haven't the confidence maybe or have got out of the habit of cycling over the years. Maybe it'll encourage people like that to get back on a bike and try it. And these villages, Malahide, Portmarnock, Sutton, Baldoyle, they're not huge areas as such. It's a relatively short cycle. If we can get a good, high quality, safe, convenient route for people to use, you'll get across from one end of the village to the other in a few minutes, and that's kind of what we're aiming for, that we intercept the people who are using the car maybe at the moment to drive from one side of Malahide down to the beach, or to for a swim, or to drive over to Sutton for to the village centre over there, and then bike parking obviously is a key part of that. So it's all kind of there's a lot of different aspects to what we're trying to achieve here, and we're really happy to take people's views on board. So I think we're coming to the end of the webinar at the moment. On behalf of myself, I'd like to thank you all for attending this evening. I'll hand back over to Roisin now.
Thanks, Paul. As Paul said there, we've come to the end of a long list of questions that's come in. So thank you all very much for being so engaged in the process and sharing your comments and your questions with us tonight. We're very grateful for them. And as we said, all of those questions will be taken into account as the team proceed with their work in the coming weeks. That's all we really have time for tonight. I'd like to remind you at this point that the very best way to share those comments and views and to make them count when it comes to the work that will be ongoing with the scheme is to make a submission, and you can make those submissions online at consult.fingal.ie, where you'll also find instructions for postal submissions if you would prefer to do so. The recording of this evening's webinar, as mentioned at the start, will be hosted in a number of days' time on fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide, where you can review it and perhaps maybe send it on to a friend or colleague who didn't get a chance to join us here tonight. My sincere thanks to the planning team and their consultants for joining us here this evening and being so open to all of your questions and so ready to and willing to answer them. And thanks also to Mark Broderick of the communications team in Fingal who produced this webinar. If you do intend to make a submission, please do remember that the submission deadline is May 9th and that all submissions must be received on the portal or by post before 23:59 hours, so that's a minute to midnight on the 9th of May. Submissions can be made on the Consult portal or by post. Only one type of submission should be made by any given individual, and submissions can be made on behalf of an individual or an organisation. So please don't delay and get your submissions in sooner rather than later, and we look forward to reading the content of all of them. Thanks again and good night.